2, 1. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for attending the Marketo user group for October of 2020 for the manufacturing space and for virtual Marketo user groups in general. Really excited about today's conversation. We have Saurabh Gupta, who's here from PlumCloud Labs, excuse me, and he's going to be doing an update for us on some of the data privacy legislation that's changing worldwide. This has been a big issue for the last couple of years with the Canadian anti-spam law, with the CAN-SPAM Act in the United States, and with the CCPA law that's coming into place here in California. And we lose sight of the fact that, with digital marketing, we have a global audience. So it's not just governance that happens here in North America, but it's also worldwide governance. And, Sarah had reached out to me and kind of mentioned, hey, we have some updates that are coming up in place here aside from North America in India and in Brazil. And that really triggered to me, this is a really important time to kind of pick up this conversation again. And then also really within kind of the greater structure of Marketo and Salesforce and how to be able to manage compliance on at an enterprise level. There's no greater person than Saurabh to be able to talk about this. And sort of, before we get into this and I hand this over to you, I'll give you some of the background and would love to hear some of your background as well with what you've been doing in the CRM community. Before we dive into that, I want to give a couple of ground rules to everybody here. So from all of our sessions, we always start off and say this is a safe place to learn. So no one of us is smarter than all of us. We all have something to learn. And so we encourage you to ask questions, and there's no judgment, basically. If there's something that you don't know, feel free to ask. And by all means, we all started out not knowing anything about it, about this space at all. And we only really learn through our engagement with each other and being able to have a safe space to ask questions. This is a collaborative environment, so lots of conversation is encouraged, of course, with this. So we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this where you can kind of, open up your mic and feel free to jump in and then ask questions. It's not a sales atmosphere, though, so try not to pitch all of your products and services. There's a time and place for that, and that's important, but it's not right now. These are fun, enjoyable sessions. But they're also professional sessions, so that the time that you invest here with us out of your busy days is also something that you're going to be able to get something back. We'll talk about upcoming news and events that are happening in the Marketo space. And the first thing to note is that this is a Marketo virtual user group. It is not the only Marketo virtual user group by any means. And so we really want you to participate, and feel free to go to some of the other events that are happening in the Marketo ecosystem. And this is a short list of what's coming up in the near future. Every Wednesday, Inga Romanoff and Sanford Whiteman in New York hold office hours. So if you have any questions, especially technical questions, Sanford's a great guy to talk to about that. Very approachable. And they have 30 minutes every Wednesday afternoon Eastern time where they kind of allow you to open up. Warren Stokes and I at the beginning, the first weekday of every month, we'll hold a Marketo user group roundup. We'll talk about that in a moment. And there's some other neat things that are happening here where Veronica Holmes at Blueprint X and their group are relaunching the APAC virtual mug in Australia. So that's pretty neat. And then also a lot of other monthly meetings that are continuing to go along, covering the new UI and then all sorts of other advanced features in Marketo as well too. If you have any questions about those, you can go to mugs.marketo.com and you'll see an updated calendar. So this is a short list of upcoming ones, but it's certainly not an exhaustive list. So highly encourage you to go to that. So as we mentioned, every month Warren Stokes and I cover off a recap of all of the different Marketo user groups. So if you saw the list in the previous slide and are unsure which one you want to be able to attend or what's relevant to the issues that you're facing in your business, every month we host a panel of Marketo user group leaders to discuss in quick bullet points what happened with those groups. And so this month we'll be meeting on November the 2nd, that slide is incorrect, at 12:30. And our hosts will be Blaine McMission from the Indianapolis Marketo user group, Inga Romanoff from the New York Marketo user group, and Andrew Parker from the Salt Lake City Marketo user group. And so if you want to attend that, I have a landing page at conversionstore.com/mugs. And you can also go to that previous mugs.marketo.com address to sign up. If you miss any of the events, if you miss this event or you want to see the recording of this event, we'll send an email out to you shortly after the session is over. But also want to encourage you to sign up for the Marketo Virtual User Group YouTube channel. And this is something that all of the Marketo User Group leaders and I have collaborated on to bring content out to you and make sure that that's captured. So I created a redirect for this at conversionstore.com/video. And you can subscribe there, but all of the different user group leaders, so you'll see manufacturing content from this group, from the Europe virtual mug, from Salt Lake City, from Chicago, from Auckland, New Zealand, from all over the world. The India Marketo user group is very active, and so they're going to be uploading content on there as well too. So you'll see a lot of different content that exists on that YouTube channel that's kept in perpetuity, so you can go back and look at any sessions or any topics that may have been covered in months past that you might have missed too. Marketo Summit is officially announced for April the 13th to the 15th. And just for security reasons, for safety reasons, next year is also going to be a virtual Marketo user group again, a virtual summit again with Adobe Summit. So feel free to log in. But the plus side on that is it's also free. So what normally would have been a $2,000 ticket to be able to go and attend Adobe Summit and learn from all of the leaders in the Adobe Experience Cloud Platform and in Marketo is actually no cost now for you to attend. So I spoke at it last year with Christina Zuniga on special events, advanced tactics, and I think it's really interesting to hear all of the different people and the questions that come out of that audience. It's a good place to learn in general. If you have ad hoc questions, I encourage you to join an online community that's starting up here called the Mo Pros, and it's a Slack community. It's actually quite far along. I think there's about, I think 1,500 people that are in that right now. And there's a lot of new content that you'll have coming out here. And I'm going to be a lot more involved with this group in the next little while, kind of paralleling some of the work that we've been doing within the Marketo community as well. So it's independently run. It's not run by any specific group or company. There's a whole series of us that have come together. And these are people across all disciplines, all platforms, Marketo, Pardot, Eloqua, HubSpot, you name it. We've all come together. And so there's lively conversation. There's a lot of great tips in there. If you're looking for a Marketo position or a marketing operations position, it's a great place to kind of go to the job board. And then also to kind of look at different types of learning opportunities. You'll see the new website that's being launched shortly. It'll have a lot of other opportunities that you can't find anywhere else to participate in. And so that's at themopros.com/join if you want to join in and participate in that. And we'll probably be welcoming you once you're online there as well too. Okay, so that's enough about me. I want to hand it over to Saurabh Gupta. Saurabh, thank you for putting this together to present for us today. I'm going to turn off the slide share in a moment here, but just to give you kind of some background. So Saurabh Gupta has been heavily involved in this space in terms of enterprise architecture for years. And you were an executive, if I remember correctly, at Salesforce.com prior to this, right? And so I'd love to be able to kind of get a little bit of an intro from you and then turn this off and then hand it over to you to start your slides and your presentation about what's happening in the India and the Brazil markets, and then also the solution that you've developed at PlumCloud Labs to be able to address some of those needs. So Saurabh Gupta, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me. Can you guys can hear me all right, correct?
Yes. I can hear you.
All right, great. Awesome. So thanks for having me. My name is Saurabh Gupta. As Michael mentioned, I used to work at Salesforce. I was the Senior Director for Global Enterprise Architecture there. I was there for about 7 years. And Peter, our Chief Marketing Officer, is also on the call. He's also ex-Salesforce. He was a product manager there. I'm based out of Chicago. And about a year and a half ago, we started PlumCloud Labs because we came across a ton of customers, Salesforce, Marketo, Salesforce Pardot, Salesforce Marketing Cloud customers. And the challenges were the same. All this evolution of digital space has happened. And a lot of our regulations that have come around, there's a disconnect there. It's non-trivial to try and manage all this and to stay compliant. And that's kind of the challenge that we want to talk a little bit about, and how how we are trying to solve it, and how our customers are have embraced the idea of more permission-based marketing that is systematic and scalable. So with that, let me share my screen and go a bit further into this. Let's see. All right. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, cool. So thanks for having me. And I should have started with this slide. We are not a law firm. So this is not legal advice. This is not a Marketo or a Salesforce statement of direction. This is just our point of view based on the work that we have done in the last 2 years in this space. So all of this information is for informational purposes only. We are an Adobe Innovate Exchange partner and a Salesforce App Exchange partner. Once more, thank you so much for taking the time. Data privacy in particular is an area that I think affects all of us personally as well. So I think it's an incredibly important topic. We are also thankful to some of our customers who have entrusted us as their partner in their data privacy efforts. And finally, I'm very thankful to my team on ground here, Peter, and some of the other folks, Aniket, Niketan, who are not on the call right now, but thank you all. Um, all right, so very quickly, our agenda is we want to cover a little bit of what data privacy laws are, what's going on in that space and why we should bother. What are the requirements, particularly when you think of it from a marketing and email marketing perspective? What are the challenges when you think of it from a Marketo and Salesforce perspective? How do you do omni-channel? How do you do self-service? How do you do this in a data privacy compliant manner? Then we would get into what options exist. How can we address the challenges on these from a technology perspective? A bit of a background on that, and then some resources that you can look at as you think through this. As Michael mentioned, please put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely try and get to them once we're done with this. I'm trying to cover a lot of ground, so I do apologize a bit in advance. This may feel like there's a lot of information, but it's all based on our intention of trying to share as much as we can. And since it's getting recorded, hopefully you will have an opportunity to review if there are things that don't make sense. And absolutely feel free to reach out to us. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a bit about me. My email address is there, saurabh@plumcloudlabs.com. I'm on Twitter as Kaizen Mantra. You can reach out to me there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can just search my name and you can find me there. As I mentioned, we are a Salesforce App Exchange app. So we are listed on that space. We are also on Adobe Exchange. So we can also be found there. So that's on this. And let's dive into why we need to bother with data privacy. So what's happened is we have data privacy laws that have come around in the last couple of years. There've been quite a few that were there, but I think the last 3-4 years, particularly with GDPR and now with CCPA and LGPD, there's like an incredible amount of action that's happening in this space. And what it boils down to in plain English is that businesses are required to treat our personal data, the what's known as a data subject, right? Your subscribers, your customers, consumers, employees, partners, any human that a business is dealing with. Businesses are now obligated to treat that personal data fairly, transparently, and lawfully. And these terms have a legal connotation, particularly in GDPR, and a number of other laws that have evolved in the global space are all, by and large, some variants of what GDPR is doing. Um, so what this really also means is that because of these laws, individuals now have specific rights and that businesses are obligated to comply with. If 4 years ago you wanted your data from a business or you wanted them to update their data, you were kind of like left to their wishes. They may do it, they may not do it. Uh, no longer is that the case. Now by law they're required to do it depending on the really depending on your area of residency. That is a key nuance about a number of these laws, whether it's GDPR, CCPA, LGPD, India's PDPB that's on the anvil. Like a ton of these laws have cross-border enforcement, which is a dramatic uh, departure from how legislation used to be earlier, right? You have a law and it would apply, if it's a US law, it applies to people in America and businesses in America. No more. With personal data privacy laws, the law applies based on the residency of the person whose data your business is processing. So if you're a US based business and you are processing data of Brazilian residents, you're obligated to comply with LGPD, which is the data privacy law in Brazil. And this cross-border enforcement is just constantly ongoing. There is a lot of work that's happening now in China, which has a draft law, for data privacy in India, and a number of these laws are all based on that cross-border enforcement idea. Very important to know. And of course, they all come with a fair amount of teeth. So they do have monetary penalties for non-compliance. I'm sure you've probably heard GDPR can be up to 20 million euros or 4% of annual revenue of a company. I think British Airways just got fined 20 million pounds in UK by the UK Information Commissioner's Office for a data breach they happened. That fine was under GDPR. CCPA, which is a California law, has a similar sort of thing where it is $7,500, up to $7,500 per record. So that can significantly balloon up. And Javier Bacara, the California Attorney General, is now, kind of taking this into consideration. And the enforcement has just started, I think, a couple of months ago. Primarily because of COVID and elections and all the other stuff that's going on, you're not seeing as much action in California, but I suspect that's only a matter of time before that changes. But more than that, more than all the reasons to do it, because of course it's legal, there is also a very strong marketing reason, right? We, as the purveyors of brand and as the sort of guardians of brand and brand value, marketers have a significantly large obligation and a vested interest in making sure that we are doing this, right? We want to build that customer trust. We want to offer transparency so that our end customers, our prospects, they really love our brand the way we want it to be loved. They really want to do business with us. They want to associate with us. And that to me trumps all of this other stuff. Sure, I will comply and I'll do all the things legally, and I can do the bare minimum and get away, which is what you're seeing in a number of cases that companies are doing. But the companies that are at the forefront of this, they understand that if we don't have great marketing data practices, if we don't bring enough transparency from a brand perspective, we have a problem. And that's another driving factor for a number of these regulations. If you look at the state of global data privacy laws, this landscape is evolving. So a ton of these laws exist, as you can see on the right here. And the ones in red are laws that are just recently enforced. So like LGPD in Brazil was enforced, I think, on 14th of August. And the other ones, which are undergoing either their inception very actively or a revision. So PIPEDA, there's a revision effort going on. China has a cybersecurity law that they've just released a draft of that has very, very similar tenets like GDPR. India's PDPB is on their, I think it's in their parliament. And again, it's got stalled because of COVID. But they are definitely going to come up with this. And again, the obligations there are very, very similar. California's CCPA is undergoing its revision, or affectionately known as CCPA 2.0 or CPRA. And this will be on the ballot in California in, I think in November, first week of November. So a lot of action is happening in this space. In the US, Senator Hildebrand has put out a draft for a data protection authority, a DPA, which will be a federal authority to do this. So even if you are in the United States and you only deal with American consumers and prospects, make no mistake that this space is going to continually accelerate. And the business imperative to have very robust data privacy is upon us. There are some interesting challenges when you try to comply with these laws globally. So if someone made a request for wanting their information, for changing their information, or anything else like that, depending on where their residence is, you have different amount of times associated. So under CCPA, you have 45 days to respond. Under GDPR for an EU resident, you have 30 days to respond. Under LGPD in Brazil, you have 15 days to respond. So the challenges for business is, how do we address these diverse privacy laws with their nuances? How do you deal with the multi-regional, multilingual? You have to have different privacy statements and policies and terms and conditions that someone is checking off when they are filling your lead gen form, right? Or downloading a white paper and filling the form. Um, you need that sort of flexibility within the enterprise to comply with these different timelines, these nuances. And another aspect of this is some of these regulations, particularly like GDPR, require an explicit opt-in. I think LGPD is the same way. How do you manage those opt-ins, whether it's for email, whether it's for WhatsApp or LinkedIn? If you operate in China, you may be dealing with WeChat, right, which is a significantly compelling platform there. So how do you manage all of these things? This is what I think the data privacy challenge looks like when we speak with customers. And this is the impact, right? This is Klarna. It's a UK, I think it's a Swedish company that operates in Europe. And they accidentally sent out a ton of email to people who never subscribed to it because of how their platform is. It's used by other departmental stores. So they are collecting these number of email addresses from people who never explicitly gave it to these guys. And then they sent out emails, and now there's an inquiry that's going to happen against them. So what we consistently hear from our customers is the following, right? Nobody that I'm aware of wants to be in this situation. They don't want to be sued, fined, or just even embarrassed. They want to address the right set of concerns. Every customer I talk to wants to do the right thing. It's just incredibly hard to figure out what that right thing is, particularly when you're talking to a ton of vendors. Every vendor, including us, right, will tell you, oh, we do this. This is what you really need to do. We are a backup company. You need to do backup, and we'll do some GDPR stuff. We are a data security company. You need to have encryption, and we do some other stuff. But to really distill it down to what is it that your organization needs to do, your group needs to do, can be incredibly hard. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping you're able to take away from our conversation today, and how you can address data privacy in a manner that offers a long-term scalability to your Marketo, Salesforce stack, or whatever other technology tools you have. So let's take a look at what areas of data privacy and what's the scope of them. I'm going to cover this really quickly, and then we can get into a little more of the Marketo Salesforce space. So first and foremost, of course, is the idea of consent and communication preference. I've put this on top primarily because of the audience I'm speaking with, right? I'm sure you guys are aware of the granularity of consent and communication preferences, of opt-in and acceptance of terms and conditions. In addition, what's happened is, particularly with COVID, as there's been an accelerated push for digital transformation, and stuff has gone more e-commerce than in person or in store. There is a greater need for integration between marketing apps, the CRM, the e-commerce, and all of that. And we need to have a consolidated store from which we are sending out emails via Marketo, or reaching out to people via SMS, or whatever other areas exist. The second part of this is a deeper understanding and implementation of privacy policies and related processes. So what are your policies? How do you communicate them in different languages? What are your terms and conditions or statements around it? Do you do a data privacy impact assessment, or DPIA, which is a requirement under like GDPR, for example? Do you manage personal data inventory? How do you manage it? What is your process around it? What is your data retention and things like that? These are requirements for CCPA and GDPR. The third broad area is some of the privacy rights. So with some nuances, like a lot of these things are common across every data privacy regulation that has come out in the last 3 years, or that is on the annual for revision. Like none of this you can get away with to a large degree. You may have variants of it, but CCPA wants it, GDPR wants it, LGPD wants it, PDPB in India will want it, right? They're all, I've like looked at a lot of these drafts or actual laws, and a ton of them want this, with some variance of how quickly you can respond, how can you respond. CCPA wants you to have like a link, on the website. GDPR doesn't say that. There are nuances, but fundamental capabilities to deliver these things are required. And finally, the idea of personal data management, which is data retention, data minimization, getting rid of information when you don't have a lawful basis to keep it, or when you have a policy that says get rid of it after a point. And what can you do to minimize a data breach? Can you mask data in your sandboxes, things like that? So that is the lay of the land. And as you can see, while we started with this conversation with marketing and email marketing and Marketo, when you think of the holistic picture, this is a sizable challenge for any organization, regardless of your size, your industry, or frankly, even your location today. What ends up happening today, back to email marketing, is the unsubscribe experience, right? Like this is kind of the default with every organization that I speak with. To a large degree, what ends up happening is they're like, sure, because of Castle and some of the other laws that have been around for a long time, I have an unsubscribe link that my Marketo, my Pardot, my Marketing Cloud, my MailChimp puts in. It's in there. Someone doesn't want, they click, they can unsubscribe. But really often unsubscribe can be a symptom of the content being irrelevant, just excessive communication, maybe inadequate amount of consent where I'm going, why am I getting this email? And really the sort of the next variant of it is to offer an upgraded experience to your customers and prospects, which is with a managed preference type capability, because that serves as the middle ground where if people don't want to hear from you, they can unsubscribe, or they can subscribe to a few things, or they can subscribe for a few things on a few channels, right? I want you to send me emails for your what's new, but I want you to send me an SMS for my next appointment, right? So things like that. So really the idea of moving from unsubscribe to a managed preference is the idea of doing a better job of permission-based marketing and personalization for subscribers. So that's great. You've got Marketo, you've got Salesforce. This should be easy, right? I can do consent management with Marketo and Salesforce. And the challenge with that is threefold. We need a capability that really can do consent and communication preference management between Marketo and Salesforce, right? You want this capability that offers a shared set of consents and preferences between Marketo and Salesforce, particularly because you may have SMS, you may have social, you may have other outreach that you may be doing potentially directly from Salesforce or through other third party. And you have emails that are going through Marketo. And this lack of a robust consent management synchronization between Salesforce and Marketo is a problem, particularly because Salesforce is investing a lot in this space, and they have this whole individual object and related consent management model, which is extremely comprehensive. And as time goes by, they will, they are and they will continue to invest building this capability for Pardot and for Marketing Cloud, because those are Salesforce products. When it comes to Marketo, I'm not seeing anything in that space that's evolving, and that's a problem. So if you have a Marketo Salesforce footprint, you want to make sure that Marketo gets a level playing field when it comes to consent management, communication preferences. And that's the space we operate in with the products like ours, with CloudCompliance. You can do that. You can make sure that there is adequate synchronization and there is consistency and cohesiveness in our email marketing. So people are getting what they are signing up for. Your person records in Marketo are updated with appropriate consent, and that is also reflected in Salesforce. And there is self-service to manage this more effectively. So let's look at what an informed consent experience would look like. So the idea is that when someone signs up and you can ask for consent, there are checkboxes there, or you may have some additional information and a link for terms and conditions. And so I'm signing up for this webinar and I say, okay, great, I want to join this. And there's a little box and I check that. Maybe I may click a link to see privacy policies. You may have, depending on how local or global you are, you may have privacy policies or privacy statements in multiple language for different regions. We do a lot of that kind of stuff too, by the way. But the idea is that that's a thought through experience. There is a human aspect to this, and it's not 60 pages of legalese. Then you want to make sure that these consents and communication preferences are appropriately stored, managed, and accessible to all the technology components you have. And this then allows you to do a more integrated omni-channel approach from a marketing perspective. So SMS, social, email, what have you, right? And then eventually what you want is a preference center or a self-service capability where the subscribers can go and update their preferences if they want. If they call in, someone on your end can update those preferences. And this centralized preference store that kind of drives our compliance across the board. This is what really gives your brand the advantage of transparency. It gives your subscribers the benefit of personalization. And it also makes it more scalable because it becomes very seamless, and it is a very self-service oriented mechanism. So I'm going to get into a little more detail of this, but I hope this is making sense so far. I'll take a minute pause here. Any anything on this, Michael? Are we doing okay?
No, you're doing great. Absolutely. Happy to open it up if you want to any questions.
Mhm.
Um, and
No, I think I'm going to finish this because I have a lot of content. I want to make sure I get that. I
okay,
just needed a checkpoint. Thanks, though.
sure,
All
sure.
right, so let's get into a little more detail of what that really means if you have Marketo and Salesforce. So, and before that, why you want to do this? You want to do this because the standalone consent management does not work. If I'm managing this only in Marketo or only in Salesforce, it doesn't work, because then it's just because then it goes against the idea of a single view of preferences and interaction across all these technologies that need it, right? You may, if you didn't have e-commerce, you may be very seriously considering it now, given the environment we are in. So you want these preferences to be available to your e-commerce, to your, Martex, whether it's Market or whatever else, and to your CRM, whether it's Salesforce or anything else. The other aspect is you want to be compliant across all of these channels, and you want to respect those preferences for your customers. And finally, the holy grail of all of this, right? We want the ability to have analytics that goes all the way from your MQL to the final close, right? And one of the things around that is how many of those emails were clicked, how many of those links were clicked. And to be able to tie this all the way, you need a really tight bond between what's coming from market, or what's coming from Salesforce, what's coming from e-commerce, probably in some analytics type platform. And that's why managing consent across these three is fairly vital. Here is an example. This is a screenshot from Salesforce. This is our product in Salesforce. And you can see the consents there, right? You can see on the left here, release notification, and on the bottom left, those are the purposes for which you're reaching out. And then you have channels like email, SMS, social, and you have opt-ins and opt-outs. And each one of those little pill controls that you see there, if you click that opt-in, you can see when that consent was obtained, what channel was it obtained on. There's a lot of auditability around it. But this actually doesn't start in Salesforce. This starts in Marketo. So let's talk about how this works. The concept is really simple. It's to collect consent at the point of initial contact, which is typically a Marketo lead gen form. And then it's to centralize, which is to sync up to your CRM and then push it out if you need to e-commerce and back into Marketo. Then it is to automate the membership of the person from a campaign perspective, like smart campaigns in Marketo. And then, when someone wants to update their preferences, they click a link in a self-service scenario and they can go update it. So let's look at it. And what it does is it then allows you to collect these consents, in lead registration. It allows you to centralize them. It allows you to automate. Sorry, I said all this earlier. I forgot I had bullets for this. And then it updates these self-service preferences. And really what it'll look like in Marketo is something like this. And I have more screenshots to show what I really mean by this. But the idea is that a lot of the self-service stuff we are bringing back, a lot of opt-in, opt-out dates that were initially collected in Marketo are then finally synced back via Salesforce again here. And this drives your membership into smart campaigns and further into who we send emails and who we don't send emails. So let's look at a more detailed version of it really quickly. Um, so in Marketo, I have this lead reg form, right? Someone's signing up, for an event or downloading a white paper or whatever it is. You're asking for consents, and those consents are collected. The check boxes for consents and the leads are collected in Marketo. You have an out-of-box synchronization between Marketo and Salesforce. They are pushed into Salesforce. CloudCompliance is a product that is native to Salesforce. It runs in Salesforce. But what it does is it gets these checkboxes or shortcodes, as we call them, from Marketo for the consents that a person opted in for. And it then generates in Salesforce related consent records. So it'll have a for date, and to date, and what channel it was obtained on, all of that. A lot of granularity, very, very comprehensive. This is a Salesforce set of objects that Salesforce has come up in the last 2 years, and we leverage them. One of the advantages of using that is you don't have to pay extra storage to Salesforce. Salesforce does not count them because it wants its customers to be compliant to these laws. So this becomes very, very auditable. The other part is if someone then picked up the phone and called a call center, if you have one, that person is probably not going in Marketo. They can go in Salesforce. They can opt or opt out, do whatever, consent management they need to do. And essentially, we are then able to push this consents back into Marketo. So now you have opt-in date in Marketo that's come through this process. And you also have a self-service link that Cloud Compliance generates in Salesforce. And this is the link that eventually your subscriber can click. And instead of unsubscribe, they can now manage their preferences. The advantage of this approach is that if you have other third-party apps, such as you have a Twilio or SMS Magic or something which is kind of driving your SMS, or if you have other social media apps that can integrate with Salesforce, you can also push those opt-ins to those. And so your omni-channel challenge of making sure you're approaching the right people is addressed there. So once these opt-ins come into Marketo, your smart campaign automation then essentially just dynamically looks at this and goes, oh, Saurabh opted in for my newsletter email, so he's in this campaign. And Peter opted out, and so I'm going to pull him out. He opted in for the recall email campaign, so I'm going to put him there. So that becomes automated at this point. Oops, sorry, I just pressed the wrong click here. So that becomes automated. And what happens next is you're now able to embed that self-service link into your email template. And so when Marketo sends this email, there is now a managed subscription link that your subscribers can click if they need to change their preferences. And they are navigated to a self-service page, which is running on Cloud Compliance on Salesforce. And essentially, their preferences are then updated. So the idea is that in general, whether you use Cloud Compliance or not, whether you build a lot of this capability, you do need some version of this solution to address the global problem or the global challenge around data privacy. So here is, some screenshots of how it looks like from a Marketo perspective. Some of the fields that you see, like the contact marketing email, these are fields in Salesforce that are created when you install Cloud Compliance and configure it, and then they are synced to Marketo, and then essentially that drives your smart campaign memberships and stuff like that. And you then have the ability to essentially map the self-service link that was generated in Salesforce in your email template. So like the manage your consent link here that you see in that yellow box, when someone would click that, they would get navigated to preference center where they can opt in, opt out, manage to a lot of granularity their preferences. And those preferences would then sync back from Salesforce into Marketo, and the smart campaigns can automatically adjust membership, and then your organization can be compliant. This is the example of how it looks like in the self-service portal. When someone clicks the link, they see very similar to what we were looking at earlier inside Salesforce. They can say, well, I want an email for sales, or I don't want it, I want it for survey. You can reach out to me on these ways. So, very, very interesting way to do this. This is passwordless, so you don't have a registration fee or anything. They just need to go to this website. If they go there, they can enter their email, and we send them like a validated encrypted URL that is time sensitive. So if you set it for 60 minutes, for the next 60 minutes, they can go do that. So that makes it really easy. You also have, this sync happens so continuously so that that your Marketo and Salesforce are always in sync with whatever the sync frequency is. And that way we are always compliant in Marketo and any other channel we are reaching out to people on. And we've built this to use Salesforce communities. There is like a free version that every customer has access to. So we have built this on top of it. So that way your organization does not have to spend additional licensing money to buy community login licenses and things like that. So very cost-effective way of doing it. So essentially, as I was mentioning earlier, this really gets a level playing field, for Marketo, because otherwise you're constantly in this challenge that I've seen with customers where they're like, yeah, I'm managing it in Marketo, but it really doesn't talk with Salesforce. So I'm really managing it for my MQLs here. I only send stuff as SQL into Salesforce. which is great. But now when you're trying to reach it through an omni-channel strategy, that kind of becomes harder. The other advantage of this approach is that it is extremely granular on every opt-in, opt-out. Every change is documented separately in Salesforce, which you're not paying for from a storage perspective, but it's great for that posterity. You know, if you have to prove compliance in a legal situation or whatever, you at least have access to all of these records. And this can be very, very granular. So it's not just about emails. You now have the ability to apply it across all your channels, across different purpose. If you use your Marketo Salesforce to support multiple divisions of your business, different regions of your business, you have a lot of granularity to manage this with this and smart lists in Marketo. And of course, then you have also the manage preference link that you can customize, offer multiple, multilingual versions and all of that. And that's what this looks like. Some resources, and then we can get into Q&A. Sorry, my PlumCloud Labs /resources got cut. But you could go to our website, PlumCloud Labs /Marketo. You can read a bit more about, some of the features that we've talked about. There is also a data sheet that you can download, which explains it a little bit more. And of course, you can always reach out to us. Once again, thank you so much. I'm so glad that I got it in time. I wanted to rush through so that we can get to Q&A. All right, Michael, I think we are done here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And it's a really complicated area with all these new laws coming into place. So we're glad that you're able to kind of be here to be able to help simplify that for us as well too. Let me just jump over here to the chat room. I see a couple of questions that have come in here before. Kieran, thank you for your comments here. Would like to start with forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name. Is it Claudine Vieras? And it sounds like you're in Brazil as well too. So I would love to kind of have you unmute if you could, and then just ask a question directly to Saurabh.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Sarah, in Brazil, we have more space, more flexibility to apply legitimate interest because the law was how can I say, was promoted with this space. How the solution works with legitimate interest? In the case that if for some clients, for some data subjects, I don't need a formal opt-in, a formal consent.
Yes, great question. So by the way, I actually did, there is a data sheet for Brazil also that I did. You can find it on our blog or send me or Peter an email and we'll share this with you. So this is particularly for LGPD because that just came, frankly, for me a bit I was like, oh, really? You're going live? Because I think you guys just went live on 14th of August or something like that. So yes, what we do from a Salesforce perspective is that we use a combination of what we call category and audience. So you can have different audience. You can say, leads or contacts of certain record type or whatever your way of classifying them is. You can say for this group of people, we need an opt-in. For this group of people, we don't need an opt-in. For this particular group of people, we need these kind of opt-ins. We need an opt-in for email. An example is a customer versus a prospect, right? So with a customer, I have contractual obligations. So I don't need an opt-in. I have a lawful basis, which is my ability to fulfill your contract requires me to contact you, right? But with a lead or a prospect, I may need an opt-in because we don't have any formal relationship. So yes, we support multiple different ways of having a different set of opt-in, opt-out type consents or none at all, whichever you need. Does that answer the question?
Yes, you did. Yes, thank you, Saurabh.
Absolutely, and I'll post this.
Karen, I'm seeing some questions come in from you. Go ahead, jump in here. Karen is the Austin Marketo user group leader in Austin, Texas as well too. So thanks for coming in here.
Hey, yeah, this is really great content. So yeah, I had a burning question to ask about your thoughts on not having a one-to-one Marketo Salesforce sync and the privacy and compliance impact. Obviously a one-to-one sync is preferred, but there's still companies that don't have this. So I wanted to hear your thoughts.
So I don't know that much about Marketo. So Karen, I'm going to ask this back to you. My understanding was like with the Marketo in particular, you can only have a one-to-one sync, right? One Marketo instance can't communicate with multiple Salesforce instance or vice versa, correct?
I mean, a bi-directional sync.
Yes.
Yeah. And
so
so meaning your point where, you know, you have all the CRM and the marketing automation platform data kind of housed in one. Just curious about, yeah, that situation where not all Marketo records are in Salesforce. And so,
I see what you're saying now.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the problem that happens, so unfortunately, like the approach that I've seen work is one of two, right? And it's typically like if I want to do a separation between MQL and SQL, that's kind of the typical use case I've heard from customers, particularly in Europe. Like I have a customer who, you know, whose Marketo was like this, like they kept everything MQL in Marketo, and only once it's qualified, then it made the jump into CRM, and then they wanted to manage it in CRM. The challenge with these data privacy laws is that what is known as a consent fragmentation is a really thorny problem to solve. If you're not replicating 100% of this over, and you want to manage, you know, some consents here, some consents in another system, that kind of comes with like a fair bit of risk. You know, like just one fine or one incident where this goes awry just kind of loses the whole point of it. So what I've seen and what my recommendation to customers is just you want whatever tool, technology, app you decide to consolidate your consents on, decide on one and absolutely centralize. This is like in the technology world, this is referred to as like a master data management concept. So that's what this is. You need a consent master. And if you have Salesforce and Marketo, you save yourself the, you know, the incredible burden of buying yet another brand spanking new solution. This is a much, much more cost effective way. You've already invested in this. The only thing you're paying extra for is on the Salesforce side, the extra storage for your MQLs, you know, those contacts, which hopefully if it's not a huge volume, that's probably not a significant amount of money. But all the consent, all the records related to consent, Salesforce is not charging you, which is huge. So if you had a million MQLs, each with like 3 channels and 2 purposes, which is not uncommon, right? Email, social, and SMS, and 2 purposes, maybe marketing and sales. That's 6 consent for every person. That's 6 million records that you just are getting free storage for, and this whole ability to manage. So my advice to everyone, particularly as an enterprise architect, even before I started this, if someone would have asked me, I'm like, centralize. Now more than ever, the need to have like the single view of customer, single view of prospect, single view of consent there is a lot more imperative to go down that path. Does that answer the question?
Yes, perfect. Love it.
Thank you.
Let me jump in for a quick question on, I guess, on my side of things, and then we'll pause the recording and then allow for a little open discussion. But would love to know a little bit more if, as you're advising these marketing operations managers and marketing executives that are looking to be able to implement a solution, you know, what's your methodology with that? If you had a checklist for the first couple of things that you would advise people as they're getting their records in order to be able to implement PlumCloud Labs, you know, where do you start?
Yes, great question. I'm kind of thinking if I have something I can share with you. So the way we basically, you know, on our website, so we do like a lot of these things, and I have a whole checklist, which is typically part of our implementation. But the idea is to essentially, sorry, hold on just a second. I'm thinking what would be a good way to answer this question. It's a version of this, right? This thing here that we are looking at. What we typically advise our customers is, I usually don't go from consent first. In this case, I went this way because of the audience, you know, because it's mostly a marketing audience. But typically the way this is the second thing here, the privacy policy and related processes. The first step is to do personal data inventory, to know what information you have, where it is, how long you've stored it for, and to have privacy policies. This is a space that you want to work a lot more with your legal and your subject matter experts in this space.
Hey, sorry, Saurabh, it's Peter. You're showing us the GDPR page right now. I think you click.
Yeah, I needed to. Thank you so much for reminding me this, Peter.
No problem. This picture will make a lot more sense to everybody else on the line. Not the GDPR page, but basically the main page.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to show just, this data privacy area scope, right? These are the 4 areas. Sorry, you're seeing my presentation now, right?
Yep, you're good.
Yep. So the second line here, the privacy policy and related processes, that's really step 1. It's personal data inventory and privacy statements, DPI, those kind of thing. This is more legal driven than marketing or technology typically. The second in this is usually privacy rights management and consent. So those two happen depending on what your customers' requirements is. Some companies really, when we work with them, they come to us because they're overwhelmed with data requests. They have these DSARs. Typically in Europe, they're like, I'm a B2C business and I'm getting like 50 requests a week, and they're just overwhelming us. And there is a significant cost to doing them and a significant risk to not doing them right. So you want to automate and standardize. But there are other customers, typically more B2B, they're not really overwhelmed with data subject requests. They may get a few, but not that many. They are more interested in consent and communication preferences just because they don't want to, displease their customers. They want to have more personalization, but more importantly, they want to be compliant. They don't want to be fined or sued by, the ICO's office in UK or whatever other data regulation authorities. Particularly, I am seeing that a lot more on consent and communication management coming out of Ireland, Germany, Norway, like a lot of countries in Europe. And we are seeing more on the privacy rights management coming out of US. The one area where consent is really getting more traction is also with US companies that market into Canada, because Pipeda is quite, and CanSpam are quite unforgiving in some of these areas. So, that would be my step 2 and 3 is between privacy rights management and consent management. And then finally, personal data management, which is the last one here on data retention and sandbox data masking.
But we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one more question here is it Srikarth? I think it is. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, but please unmute and feel free to ask your question to Saurabh. I can recap otherwise if he's not unmuted. But it basically says, what are the recommended channels for promoting a product services without an opt-in?
Google Ads. Particularly from an email perspective, you don't need an explicit opt-in in United States, just in America, right? Under CCPA, it's an explicit opt-out. CCPA has specific things, but not an explicit opt-in. Europe does, Canada does, right? So it really boils down to, your company's really sort of coverage, right? Are you only a US only, you're only doing things in the United States? So you have some of these because it also affects deliverability. You don't want people to report you as spam and all of that. But in general, if you're looking at anything that doesn't require opt-in, as we move forward in this new world and all these new regulations coming in, which by the way, with CPR in US, so in another few months, that opt-in, you don't need an opt-in, maybe something that may not exist. In general, a good idea is to make sure that you go down this opt-in path, particularly because you are trying to be more permission-based marketing oriented. Otherwise, you're just broadcasting with some paid media, paid advertising.
Just to build on that from a marketer's perspective, data privacy regulations right now are mostly focused on PII, right? Personally identifiable information that you store and what you can or cannot do with that. So that's basically the line in the sand, right? If you're not using PII within the organization, any other channels that are not necessarily representing that are not covered under that, right? So LinkedIn ads, Google ads, all those types of things. You can target individuals, you can target specific companies in those platforms, but you're not actually storing the PII. So it's a little bit of a gray area, but that's basically the line in the sand, at least from my perspective.
Okay, great, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I want to respect everybody's time that we're coming up to the top of the hour here. It was a really good discussion. So thank you very much for doing this. One thing that, so we'll just kind of cap off here and talk about our next meeting, which is set up for Thursday, November the 19th. So a week before the American Thanksgiving at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And at that point in time, we're going to just do, oh, this slide isn't updated. Jeff is not talking about data governance briefing again. But he was going to just talk about a kind of a year end basically for kind of managing your Marketo instance and kind of gearing up into the holiday months. So Jeff is a friend of mine who's a marketing automation consultant and works with me at the Conversion Store on projects now. And so we're looking, he's a 3-time Marketo champion as well too. So there'll be a lot of insights that'll be coming in from that side of things. And so definitely want to kind of leave you all with a quick note that, you know, we like to think of when you think of coming to these events, right? We enter as guests, but we leave as friends. And so we very much hope that that's the spirit of these conversations as well too, and these discussions. And I feel like this month, we hope you learned something new and that you're prepared for the upcoming data privacy issues that are the new laws that are coming in place in 2021. Again, Saurabh, thank you again for presenting. If you have any questions, feel free to go to their website at PlumCloudLabs.com. And thank you very much. If you have any questions in the meantime, we'll stick around. We'll leave it open for a little while. We'll cut off the recording right now. And obviously you'll have a very busy time of year as we're getting into Q4. So we'll let you go on your day. And thank you for spending some time of that day with us today on the Marketo user groups.
Yeah, thanks. This was great. I really enjoyed the conversation and the question answers. If there are any other questions, I mean, I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes. So please feel free. And like Michael said, you know, you can reach us on plumcloudlabs.com, me or Peter. And if there are no other questions, I would request anybody who's in United States to please go out and vote.